Hey everyone, we're taking a look at World of Kings and Arno's ruins in Overlord mode today. Now, this is a really challenging dungeon to begin with, and Overlord wasn't any nicer to it. But I have been kind of putting this off because it's a challenge, and getting a group where I actually know all the mechanics or can learn all the mechanics are hard too. So I'm going to go ahead and post this because it's a really good group. Now, this is Overlord 9, so it's got a lot of extra mechanics that you're not going to see in the dungeon as far as when clearing the mobs. So if you happen to see these purple orb things with the circles underneath them, definitely stand in those if you're not aware of that and haven't seen it before. This will be random on different Overlord dungeons. You'll also see these yellow or these purple circles around you that are a lightning thing. If you get close to your friends when you have that, the lightning will transfer to them and eventually you'll die, or they'll die. So you want to make sure that you stay away from them. And there's these black circles on the ground. That's where these purple things spawn. So that's it for kind of the random mechanics. Also, those darker circles you're supposed to stay away, but I don't see a lot of people doing that, probably because they don't always see them. Alright, besides those mechanics, sometimes there is like a pinkish tower, crystal tower thing that'll spawn in a circle, and in those mechanics you want to actually stand in the pink tower as opposed to avoid it. And I think that's it, other than the exploding pillar of flame things that come up, which you will see in here. Those are usually the normal yellow puddles or circles you avoid. Those are the mechanics that you'll tend to see in Overlords as you get to higher levels. Now here for Arno's, we are just going to do the normal thing for the first boss. You just DPS her. When the mushrooms spawn, you'll have 2 mushrooms that spawn. You will take down those mushrooms. Besides that, avoid the AoEs that appear randomly across the floor. You're also going to get circles that you're going to need to avoid that have some sort of whirlwind. Now this purple circle is different. That's the lightning mechanic again that you get in Overlord, or that is this particular Overlord dungeon this week. And then those, you saw the whirlwinds there, another avoid. And then there's also green circles that appear around you that you want to move away from everybody on. I think healers can dispel those, so that works very well. There's the green circle there. And again, the lightning circle, purple, and here's these whirlwinds again. And then you have another round of the mushrooms that spawn. Just go through and kill each of the mushrooms. And I think that that's pretty much it for this boss. It's just pretty much a DPS and avoiding of any AoE things, and then moving away for these greenish circles. Okay, moving right along, we're going to go up the hall to clearing the other mobs. And for those, again, you're going to get all sorts of crazy mechanics depending on what level of Overlord you're in. If you're lower, you're going to be fine. If you're higher, there's, pillars of flames that pop up. So, it really just depends on that. But go through and kill all the mobs. If you die a lot, it's okay because it's free reses. You just res a safe spot and move on. Okay, so for the second boss of Arnos, this is kind of where I think most people get kind of a little bit problems. You're going to have one extra mechanic, and this extra mechanic are like these purple circles. Just like a large purple circle that appears around the boss, and it's, periodically throughout the fight, maybe only a couple times, but it will put an extra counter on you. And that counter, if you get hit with it a second time and you still have a counter on you, then you will wipe the group. So I think I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, why it works the way it does. But the way people have decided to avoid the counter is to split the group into 2 parties. And one group will be kind of like the top DPS and the tank. We found worked really well to go to one side, and then the rest of the people go to the other side. So you will have the tank and the DPS on one side, and then when you get to like 15 stacks, because you don't want the stacks to be more than I think it's 30. Once you get to 30 stacks, it wipes the group. And so when we get to 15 stacks, you're going to switch sides. Now, typically people always say, okay, at like 70% and 50% and 40, 30% and 20, whatever percentages, you switch bosses, which is great if you're all together. But because you have to do that because the bosses have to stay within 30 points of each other, 30% of each other. So of their health. However, if you have a DPS and a tank on one side, you're doing damage to that boss at the same time you're doing damage to the other. So in theory, you should be able to continue like that without having to worry about the health being too much of a split. However, with this extra purple circle thing, you need to be more broken up into two teams. So what you're going to do is you're going to split into two groups. Each group is going to tank it, and when you get to 15 stacks, switch sides, and then go ahead and DPS, and then 15 stacks and switch sides. Okay, if you're less familiar with this boss, they do a series of AoEs. Some of them are circles where you have to move out and then move in. This lightning mechanic is extra from Overlord. They do these triangle AoEs that you avoid, but it's mostly doing DPS to the boss and watching the stacks counter. Now we will switch sides when the stacks get to 15, and then what you do is you run across, and sometimes there'll be thorns, so take out the thorns as you run across, and just try to avoid any AoEs that are along the ways. There is a share damage mechanic in here that hits sometimes, so be careful of that. And here's this purple circle that I was talking about. So you don't want to stand in that. If you were to get in that, you'll get the extra counter. Sometimes it's really hard to avoid, but most of the time you hopefully can avoid staying in there, and at least you have to avoid hitting it twice in a row. Since the rest of this fight is pretty much the same, and as at least as adventure, and you're kind of get the idea here. Again, just watch that stack counter in the middle of your screen and switch when it gets to 15. Hopefully you should have enough of what you need in order to get past this particular boss. I'm going to let it play out in the background on fast forward. Okay, I lied. I ended up cutting the boss fight down, but nobody wants to sit here for 45 minutes while we go back and forth and do the same thing over and over. So once the boss is down, go ahead and move to the center, clear out the mobs in the middle, and up to boss number 3. So the last boss is pretty similar to adventure version, but I think it's worth going over the strategies again because it is a challenging boss. Pull the boss back towards the stairs, at least for the tank, and tank it on the stairs side. Now I usually tank it on the back side, but it worked pretty well tanking it on the stairs side, so we're going to go ahead and go with that for this. So tank it on the stair side and just face the boss away from DPS and healers. Make sure DPS and healers to stay behind the boss. Now when it says to turn your back on the boss, turn your back and make sure you either target yourself or something like that so you can turn around and not be pulled back towards the boss until that purple circle goes by. Now after that you're going to get AoE that's in the front half of the room, which is why it's important to face the boss away from the rest of the party. And then you're going to go ahead and continue your DPS. And now this again is the lightning circle. Make sure that you stay away from your party members if you have that in your Overlord version, but again, it's for higher Overlord levels. Okay, then the next mechanic you're going to see is when the boss does this triangle of damage area in front of her, and then she just rotates one direction or the other, so you're just going to move away from the front area, and that's pretty easy to avoid. Alright, you'll have a section here where you're going to just avoid some AoEs that cross the center of the room, and go ahead and continue to DPS the boss. This part of the fight is fairly simple. You're going to then be followed by more of the turn your back to avoid being charmed by her eyes. target yourself and turn around. This is kind of why I like the stairs there, because I can run to the stairs. And continue to DPS the boss. Okay, unlike adventure mode at 50% health, the boss does not have you collect charms around this little circle area. Instead, she does what she does in the second half of the fight, which is port you to collect tokens. One is behind me. There's a teddy bear in the corner. There is a flower up here at the entrance, and then where the two bosses for number 2 were, there is another charm. So make sure you collect all 4 charms. There's these little red puddles in the middle, which are no big deal, but go ahead and continue to collect those charms. Make sure to stop when the eyes are open and looking at you, though honestly in this one it seems like as soon as they close you're able to walk again and it's not a huge deal. So continue to collect all 4, and then at the end of once you have all 4, you're ported back to the boss to continue another round of DPS. Now this second half of the fight, there is an additional mechanic that you need to be aware of. Alright, at this point, 2 of the DPS are going to get messages, and I'm not sure if you can see them. They just came back from the back. They have to drop these like ads behind them, and these ads do the gaze, the stunning thing that the other ones do. So take them to the back, and then the tank has to switch to the DPS side at that point. Again, here I usually have Iron Will up just in case I get stunned, but you really should tank on the DPS side at that point so that when they do those purple circles, you can avoid getting stunned. Okay, we're going to follow that by another round of collecting tokens and stopping when the eyes are open. Once all the tokens have been collected, again you'll be ported back up to the boss, and then you will go ahead and finish off the fight with the same mechanics that you saw already. There is another round of the 2 ads that you have to take to the back of the room, which I want to show you. But just in the meantime, turn your back on the boss and don't get stunned, and go ahead and DPS. Now here you'll be able to see the 2 text boxes with the red text over their heads. Those are the 2 people going to the back corner of the room. And now you're going to want to make sure to tank and have all the DPS on facing the stairs. That way when the gaze of the 2 ads opens, you are not hit by a stun. If you happen to get hit with a stun, that's when Iron Will is absolutely wonderful, and hopefully you won't get hit by both of the stuns coming from those ads. So here's another gaze opening, and because your back is currently to those 2 ads, you should be good without having to worry about getting hit by that. And that's it for this dungeon. Hopefully you found this helpful. You're watching VGO40, and this is VGO Girl, and we will see you next time in World of Kings.